So, yeah.
So I'm going to be, you know what question I'm going to ask, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to ask the brothers.
Yes.
Talk about the sisters, because I've been raising this question every single time I come
Please
to one of
do.
these. So I'm looking at the posters that you put up, and I know that my sister-in-law Lorraine, she's a visual artist, and she did the posters for Ahmed's concert. I have a bunch of posters that she drew. And she also was involved in setting up a school, which was run for children, African children, in terms of the school. And I also know the role that I played. Let me not even go in terms of a musician's life. So I'm like, I know that the sisters were doing stuff, and I'm not hearing that we mentioned Amina. I went to a whole presentation on Amiri. And I was about to stand up and kill somebody in there because they didn't even mention Amina at all. Like so I'm gonna ask again, and eventually you'll get to it. We need to have a full picture because I don't think that this work was done without the fierceness of us.
It could not have been done.
So
the art department in Newark, Congress for African People, was Johari, I can forget the other sister's name, from Chicago. But it was basically women ran the art department. And everything we did was visual. So from the covers of our books to the posters we did, to the murals on the side of the building, we did 3-story murals. All that was women led that. There were more women in the Newark Congress for African People than there were men, probably two to one. So no, women, let's remember, one of the things they leave out about why there were so many women, and even in the civil rights movement, before we get to Black Power, is white supremacy and white terror includes gang rape. And many of the sisters are joining the movement in overwhelming numbers because that's the face of white supremacy. That if you look at Monroe, North Carolina, a white man knocked his sister down the stairs because she wasn't proving them. Another white man tried to rape a pregnant mother in front of her children. And when they took the cases to court, they threw the cases out. So the sister said, either show us how to use these guns or help us out, right? What's that sister in Little Rock? Daisy Bates. Daisy Bates grew up an orphan because when her mother was being gang raped by white men and her husband tried to intercede, they killed both of them. So she always carried a pistol as she was leading the statewide NAACP. We did a book, I'm teaching a course right now called Standing on Our Sisters' Shoulders. And it's a year-long course in which, just touching on about 24 books on different sisters in different periods and things like that. But I learned the history of the Black Arts Movement basically after Larry and Baraka. It was Amina Baraka and Faraha who knew, they had been in Newark first. They had gone to the Black Arts West in San Francisco, so they explained the origin of the beef between the US organization of Black Panthers to me, the Black House. Women are right in the center.
State-sponsored beef.
All those things. So you're talking. I've been doing a number of books on that subject. I'm gonna tell you one thing though. Unfortunately, some of the brothers in the scholarly community have been giving us a lot of pushback, saying that we're distorting history by talking about all these women and stuff like that. But I learned the history of the movement. The sisters would sit me down at lunch and, it's like my mother used to say, you're not gonna grow up that ignorant in my house. Right? So that's the way the sisters felt about teaching us the history. They're the ones who carry much of that, particularly the social history of the movement is there. And we need to do a lot more. I've had a lot of sisters, young sisters, interview Amina to get that history. Matter of fact, what's his sister? Farmer. Ashley Farmer has just done a book about women in the Black Power movement, and she goes into May Mallory and on and on and on.
Mallory.
So
The Absolutely, yeah. I interviewed Amina this past weekend at the People's Forum, which we're gonna do again. There was a performance, and then she read her poetry, her jazz poetry, and then we did a panel discussion with only her.
I was the
This
only
past
brother on
Saturday.
the Women's
We're
Commission.
gonna do that. And thanks to Kamosi helped with that. Professor Woodard helped make that happen. So,
Well, you know, at the East, I mean, just very basically, you know, we, in terms of our internal development, you know, we had two major organizations, the East Brotherhood and the East Sisterhood.
Right.
And within the East Sisterhood, of course, I mean, well, I got to tell you, I mean, the East Sisterhood was the organization that really organized the 50th anniversary. I mean, you know, they did most of the work. You know, they're the ones who, you know, deal with the communication, you know, keeping the email list alive, going ahead and making sure that they've got everybody's phone number, etc. So, I mean, there's just a lot of work, obviously, that, you know, the sisters take. But I will have to say, and I remember this very clearly, there was a show on WBAI where they interviewed a black woman who did a history of the Congress of African People. And she was talking about how misogynist and sexist the Congress of African People was. But she, like I said, was one who wasn't there, who talked to somebody who wasn't there, who talked to somebody who was. So I corrected them on my show in regards to that, saying, well, listen, I was there, and this is the reality in terms of what happened. Because we were very clear in regards to, number one, putting women in leadership roles in our organizations, whether it was CFUN or whether it was the East organization, we had women in leadership roles. And we saw that as being, you know, critically important and, you know, something that we consciously went ahead and did.
Right.
So,
And we were in Trinidad, the sisters from the US organization from Los Angeles made a presentation there in Trinidad. We had an International Black Power Studies conference there a few years ago. And they went into when the brothers were in prison, they ran that organization for about a decade there. And I think one of the things that happens, we can criticize brothers for male chauvinism, we can do that, right? But what we don't need to do is to wipe out the contributions of all those women who did the slave work and made that stuff happen. And matter of fact, when Vincent Harding wrote the thing about the Gary Convention, he said that the most disciplined group running that complicated 12,000 people, largest black political convention in American history, were the sisters.
that's right.
Right? So they were remarkable in that regard.
One G2's buddy was Kamal Khan, it's Kamal Khan, that's for the G2. But their wives they were part of the pack. They didn't separate. They were one. Brother Kamal Khan and his wife, Moir, they did things as a unit. Aaron Gates and Elizabeth Gates, veterans of World War II, Max Roach's buddy. They did things as a unit. There was no separating them. I know this for a fact, because these are the people whose shoulders I stand on their shoulders, man. Kamal Khan and his wife wrote Black Guerrilla Warfare, not
Right.
Kamal. That was the two of them. She's a clinical psychologist, man. They did that as an act. There was no leaving one out. Because that's the divide and conquer again.
Yes, yes.
Well, you know, interestingly enough, when I met my wife, right, I met her while I was working with the Sunrise Band in 1991, and we were performing at a club in London. It was called Ronnie Scott's.
Yeah.
She came in with a friend. She didn't know anything about Sun Ra. Her friend didn't know very much about Sun Ra, right? And the Sun Ra band this is in 1991 Sun Ra band, so we were way up there in terms of where we thought we were, in terms of who we were and what we were doing and everything like that. And we were playing at Riders Council, which was a major club in London. So, interestingly enough, I've been told by a lady who I've been dealing with beforehand needed to stop messing around with all these white women because, you know, that wasn't exactly where I was supposed to be at, right? But I said, the only people that come in the clubs are white women, you know, so, you know, it's like, what's a man supposed to do, you know? You know, so in walks my wife now, Monique. She walks into the club, yeah. And what am I supposed to do? You know, we talk to each other, you know, we take each other's information. I find out that I'm born the same day as her father, May 10th, you know, and we start communicating from there. So fast forward a few days and she writes an article on me. She writes an article on me because she's a journalist and, you know, she publishes in this black periodical that's called what? Black Arts Magazine.
In what year?
This is 1991. And so we go through it, and you know, and she puts out this thing that I'm actually not understanding of anything that involves a feminist culture. Yeah, because I'm saying like jazz, you know, women's jazz month. Well, you know, I say, well, you know, women, they need to be able to play, you know. You know, if they can't play, they ain't, you know, I mean, you know, what the hell? And she puts all this in the paper, you know, in the periodical. She says, he's like, you know, a Neanderthal and shit, you know what I mean? You know, basically, that's what, he's like, he doesn't really understand. But what I did come to understand was that I had a woman who really understood something that I didn't understand, yeah? And so in 27 years, because we got married 6 months after we met, and we've been married now for 27 years.
Right on.
And what I've understood, right, that I didn't understand then, you know, is how important that other side of me is, right? That I was actually missing something that she brought into my life, yeah? And she's been in my life to really be able, she's given me a daughter, you know, who is now in college, you know, and we raised 2 sons, you know. So, you know, I've understood something about a power that was dormant in my own life, because we all have the male and female power. You know, if you subjugate that in somebody else's life, you usually subjugate that in your own life. You know what I'm saying? And it makes you less of a human being. So I got to understand that. You know, the real thing is that yin and yang, together we make a whole, yeah? And there are great things that we can do when we work together like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mr. Gene, you have any? Okay.
So far, you've concentrated from the music side mostly on jazz. And if you go back, let's say more in the 60s, just before the East, in the middle of the 60s, when there was rhythm and blues and soul, so much here in Brooklyn, there's almost no history of it. There are, you know, I can talk to an older musician and mention the 521 Club, and they'll all have either been there, played there, or something. And you try to find something online about the 521, which was at Franklin and Fulton, and you can't find, you can find one little blog mention, no photo, no nothing. So where does all of that fit in? You know, kind of as a precursor to the jazz and the poetry and the other arts that you're talking about.
Well, you know, one of the people who knew the history in terms of Brooklyn, especially well, was Randy West. Of course, he's gone now, but you know, the clubs like the 521 and Club La Marshall and even the Blue Coronet.
Yeah.
People don't remember these things, and it's the same thing in terms of once again, you know, collecting and preserving that history. You know, when the first time I saw Miles was at the Blue Cornet. You know, so it's important in Harlem. Count Basie's. I saw Miles at Count Basie's in Harlem. You know, who knows about Count Basie's?
Yeah, our smalls.
Yeah, you know, so it's the same thing. We have all of this rich history that we have to go ahead and document and preserve because it's our history, it's no one else's. And if we don't, it'll be gone.
That was the 521 upstairs.
Yes.
I remember that club. I was a kid, because I lived in that neighborhood. And then as an adult, I could go playing up there.
I mean,
And there was a fusion between the art, you know, a lot of jazz musicians were the ones who went to the studio and did the R&B, right? But Baraka was surrounded by all kinds of musicians. So we had people in the records he did from Earth, Wind and Fire, with James Brown, Stevie Wonder, The Temptations, Jackson 5, went through the streets of Newark to awaken the community. See, the politicians couldn't get people to even register to vote. It was the musicians who explained to them, this is important. Come out your house, here's drum beat, coming out the house, dance a little bit. Now let's register. Back then you had to like take the record to the community. You couldn't vote like you register it's easy to register now. You had to take the books there on a certain day and you had to create something to make them come to it. So the thing that Baraka always used was the music. And that's why thousands of people came out. And we were surrounded by all kinds of musicians who helped us out. Well, we didn't have any money in the beginning either. I mean, you know, it was the musicians that came out and did all that for us.
Question about crossing over and Jackie Robinson playing at down at Evansville. Mr. and Mrs. Gage, they were big jazz people. They're friends of Miles Gage with Max Roach, real good friends with Max Roach. We grew up together. Now, Mom and Pops, they would go see Jackie Robinson all the time. And Pop Gage was an old Negro basketball player, the Barnstormers. Now, I'm gonna ask this question based on how strong the Negro Leagues were back then. And jazz, Mom and Pops, they had every album ever put out by any jazz artist. He was just big. He goes way back to the trombone player. But anyway, this thing that happened so we just started crossing over because that gives an opportunity for those who believe flattery, they said, the best form of imitation is, the best form of flattery is imitation, right? But for a long time it's been thievery, and now it's on an institutional level, thievery. So we asked the question we were asking earlier, how do we allow ourselves to be stolen? We know thieves are, that's the way America works, thieving. So how do we get into this crossover business? And why didn't we support each other in the jazz clubs on a large scale? What happened with the sports? We support each other in sports. With Jack Robinson, the Negro League Baseball League. How we didn't support each other in jazz? I don't understand that. Pops never told me how that didn't happen.
Well, you almost asking about the history of America. It's a big question. It's a big question. But let's remember, the reason that they did the baseball thing is because the attendance at the white baseball game were down. And at the black baseball game, they realized the attendance was up.
I didn't know this.
So it's not like, so when they desegregate this stuff, it's because they're trying to get that black market.
I understand that. How do
Right.
we allow? That's my question. How do we allow? We saw it happen to baseball. How do we have it happen to jazz too? We saw it happen to baseball.
But we made efforts. As jazz musicians, we have made efforts. There have been efforts that have been made throughout, you know, whether we're talking about the 1950s, we're talking about the 1960s, 1970s, not so much in the 1980s, you know, but there were certainly efforts made then too. You know, I think in every generation there have been some conscious musicians who said that we see what's happening and we have to organize to prevent that from happening. Now, whether there were enough musicians to be able to make and affect the situation, that's not necessarily true. But there have been enough musicians to create a history so that we can then look back on it and say, somebody did stand up and say, this is not the way we're supposed to be doing it. And there are musicians who today who can draw from that history and say, you know, we don't have to stand for this because we have evidence that there were musicians who came before us who didn't stand for it. You know, there's a lot of archival material that indicates that we, all of us, were not down with, you know, turning, you know, our backs towards ourselves.
And of course, you know, integration didn't necessarily work for us institutionally. You know, we had black banks, we had black insurance companies, and we had black schools. Once integration happened, folks didn't see the need for a black insurance company or a black bank. And what happened in the South when the schools were integrated, the black teachers got fired and the black schools were closed. And then the black students had to go to white-run schools. So part of it, of course, is divide and conquer, which is a strategy which will always work.
Right.
It's worked all the time, and as you said, you know, very often people keep falling for it. You know, it's the doke, as we used to say. For the oogie doke. If you fall for the doke, people fall for the doke.
OP's next.
You know what the problem is also? We don't love ourselves. All right? That is the worst problem. Okay, you know what I call the United Hates of America is all about. But we also have to love ourselves. Look, we've had Black Wall Streets, we've had Philadelphia. The worst thing as a displaced African, unfortunately born here by force and not by choice, the worst thing that ever happened to us was integration. Now, if you mean equal jobs and equal opportunities as far as education, fine. And leave it at that. You don't have to go and move into their neighborhoods. We have ourselves. I mean, you know, and I tell you something, I don't understand it. And I'm a baby boomer like you are. You and I are the same age. And I didn't get it then, and I don't get it now. And you know, Dr. John Henry Clark always said this, we have no friends. Now, since we know we have no friends, we better get friendly with one another worldwide, because at one time the world was all black. It was only us. So, like I said, I'm baffled.
Well, one thing that Malcolm X and James Brown and a couple other people would do is to go into, when he wanted to develop his own newspaper, he went and see how the other people were running the newspaper.
That's what the
Copied it
Japanese
down
did.
and went back and built his.
Right.
Amiri Baraka would take me to different factories when I first got out of school. And he said, you see how that's operating? He said, now we have all these abandoned factory things in Newark, set up one here, right? So we did the number. Actually, I hate to say, you know, there is a history of us loving each other.
Yeah, but it went
And
down the toilet.
white violence
Because
destroying the stuff that we have developed. There's a documentary called Banished
yes.
about all the black farms and
Right,
businesses
right.
that were there. So much of our history has been buried. And I developed a $6.4 million housing development. As soon as we put $1.5 million on the foundation,
Yeah.
white ruffians came and beat my workers up. The black high school students came every morning before going to school to support those black workers going through the gauntlet of violence against them. But they ended up burying $1.5 million in the foundation. I went back in that site the other day, they built something on top of it. That is much of our history, is our ancestors have built much of America, right? And white people have taken a lot of it and they buried the other part that had our name on it. And so we have to reclaim that that stuff there. But there are some histories of us doing it, but one thing is the thing about segregation that we have to watch out for is at a time of technological change, let's say Booker T. Washington's time,
Yeah.
when they're electrifying machines, if you're in a school with a non-electric machine, and that's what you're learning, and white people are operating a machine that have electric, then when you go to the job, right, you can't compete, right? So we have to be very careful about when it is that they're trying to separate us out and for what reason. And usually it's not to do us a favor.
But we are the ones that invented a lot of that stuff, okay? We made a mistake by trusting them. That was our mistake. That was our mistake. And like I said, I don't understand something, and I don't mean to hog up everything. You mean all those people, all those men during the Uncivil War who were taught how to shoot a gun? You mean to tell me in 1865, when those rednecks formed the Ku Klux Klan, you mean to tell me we couldn't form a vigilante movement? Because I'm going to tell you something again.
You know, there's a book out about the self-defense called We Fought Back.
Yeah, I know, but we're still not fighting back. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You got to get me, but Major
Well,
said
this is a whole nother discussion, because back after Bacon's Rebellion, which is something that historically people don't even know about,
Right.
when essentially in North America the white race was created, that what happened was, one of the things they made sure, they said that free blacks could not own weapons. Okay? So now, in the Second Amendment, I'm just going to end with this, where it says a well-regulated militia. What is that well-regulated militia? That's what is supposed to stop slave rebellions. Okay? So, in terms of, raising that question, I mean, still to this day, you look at stop, question, and frisk. What was the purpose supposedly be? To stop blacks and Latinos from having guns. Okay? So, that's another discussion. We gotta have that, because we're way off topic in that regard.
Yeah.
No, all right. Can I just ask about the buildings though? Because that's one of the things, we drive through parts of the city and Ahmed's like, oh, so-and-so used to be here, this used to be here. But we don't name our buildings. And so to me, one of the things that we could do, I don't know how we could do it, maybe we do it virtually, or we stick up a poster where can't nobody get it, and it's a black pack which says, so this building was that. But one of the things is to remind people historically that this went on here. And, our young people don't know their history. I can't tell you. They don't even know the history 10, 20 years ago, let alone what we're talking about. So, unless you're raised, our child knows our history, our children know our history, but for most people, most young people, they don't know our history. So, if it's not out here in some kind of way that they can see it and understand it, and at least recognize that we didn't, we fought, they just took us out and murdered us, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't like we didn't do anything, you know what I'm saying? This is on a real tip. But our children don't know that we fought back.
Well, and also the publishers won't publish many of the books about this.
Right.
Bloody Lounge, when the brother Hassan Jeffries, who's from Brooklyn, wrote Bloody Lounge, and the way they do it in colleges, you publish or you perish, right?
Yeah.
So he wrote the book to get his tenure for his job, and they were going to kill his book. And they're called blind readers, people you can't see, said, you don't have enough good white people in the book. All you talking about is these bad, with the name of the book is Bloody Lounge.
Right.
So but the strategy we developed, which is a national strategy, is to put enough of our people to be blind readers so we can catch the ball. So they gave the book to me, I approved it, it got published. But before that, since people were not thinking nationalistically, they were letting the brothers and sisters perish. So a lot of these books, they're sitting on the shelf somewhere, somebody wrote it, and nobody ever published it. But it's not, but that's another part of the struggle. So we have to take that consciousness into these new arenas and keep that struggle going.
Yes, and that's leading into an important area in reference to, and then we'll get to Reggie Sylvester in a second. Everything that's been brought up right now. Do you see that as a parallel happening with the struggle for musicians to control what they create in reference to what happens with the record labels, with ownership of music, and was that kind of social motivation that you think was behind what led so many musicians to run in their own spaces? Because it's tied in with everything that everybody's been saying, because music is a reflection of our struggle. So that issue with musicians controlling what we create, would you see that as something that is also included within the dynamic that is being discussed now?
Well, distribution was a barrier, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Say it. I would think that, you know, if you are trying to be able to live from your music, the self-determining aspect of it is essential. I mean, you know, how are you able to do the things that you need to do if you are not able to benefit from what it is that you've created? You know, it is like essential to being able to do that. But the mindset that we have been given is that what we have created is not that important. You see, so it really is a paradigm shift that we have to do as artists, as human beings, as African people in this culture, that who we are is important, what we do is important, you know, where we come from is important, our people are important. It's a complete paradigm shift that we have to work with every day of our lives in order for it to be complete. You know, to get up to say, okay, you know, for instance, I'm a teacher of music at an elementary school on Jefferson Avenue, right down the street from the sister's place. I'm working with precious little 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 10-year-olds, you know what I'm saying? You know, I have to know every morning I get up, I do my sit-ups, I do my push-ups, I get up at 5 o'clock, you know what I mean? You know, I go downstairs, I'm on the machine, you know? That's the kind of work that I gotta do because I know I'm working with some minds that have to be touched, you know, that have to have some kind of African sensibility in them, you know what I'm saying? If they're not getting it at home, they gotta get it at school because they ain't gonna get it nowhere else. So, you know, I feel myself with that, but that's really what allows me to say who I am, right? Because I know that what I'm doing is for our people. And I know that what I'm doing for our people on a daily basis, right? Monday through Friday, and then Saturday at sister's place, and then Sunday I can rest, goddammit, you know what I mean? I can actually rest for a day so I can get up and do the whole thing again. But it's for real, you know?
Yeah. And why do you think John Coltrane in particular is categorized often as a person that didn't have these concerns socially? Because we talked about certain kinds of misinformation regarding certain components of the history of this music, but it turns out that he indeed was very motivated by the environmental factors happening around him as a black musician, and was not complacent in that regard. And he has a tendency to be portrayed as a person that didn't have these concerns.
Let me just say one thing in terms, as you talk about, you know, naming things. There's an interesting contradiction right here in Brooklyn, and that is that we can have a street co-name for Biggie Small, and we can't have a street co-name for Jitu Wayusi.
Wake this up.
Now, what happens is it's the Negro politicians, and for numerous reasons, they're frightened. You know, they see it easier to go ahead and get a street name for Biggie than to get named for Jitu. Although we've been through everything. We went to the community board, you know, we went to the people, we got the petitions, we did everything. And this has been ongoing now since the time that he died. All right? But the Negro politicians, and you got 2020, 2021.
That's that Novocaine.
Yeah, listen, yeah. You know,
Don't stop
they're
suffering.
looking at who's going to be the borough president, who's going to be the mayor. And they're scared. They're scared because they think communities that don't have the numbers, because I mean, they're trying to depopulate, obviously, gentrification. They're trying to go ahead and, shift the numbers. We see what's happened in Manhattan after a series of Black and Latino borough presidents. The last two have been white, and white folks have said they're not giving it back anymore. So unless we go ahead and organize, the issue in terms of everything that we're talking about is a lack of organization. That if it's musicians that have to come together, then the musicians have to come together. If it's whomever, if we have to come together to go ahead and make sure that our history is preserved and collected, then we have to come together. But the issue right now is that we talked about the National Black Assembly, we talked about the Congress of African People, we can talk about the National Black United Front, we can talk about the National Black Independent Political Party. We had all of these structures and we don't have them anymore. And now people are walking around, listen. No, I ain't even gonna go there.
But there's more black people in New York City than there are in the whole state of Mississippi.
That's right.
This is the center of the Black America in New York. What is it, 2.5 million black people? I mean, that's a whole lot of black people, right? So it's very important when you watch TV every day, they put you to sleep. They want to talk, because our identity on television is we're a minority. If you woke up, you'd know you were the majority, and then a lot of things would move.
Yeah, that's so true. And you mentioned at the beginning of this talk this evening that Sun Ra was a person that indeed had that kind of understanding. In fact, going, with his whole existence, as long as he was here in the world, there was never a time where he didn't have that particular kind of understanding that's being discussed now. And, reference to self-determination, putting out music on his own label, and basically doing things along the lines that were not along what you were quote unquote supposed to, the channels you were supposed to take. And the East Cultural Center being a place that facilitated musicians who had enough backbone to be self-determined within the art that we're creating.
Yeah. Well, understand this. Sun Ra arrived on the planet in Birmingham, Alabama, and he spent the first, from 1914 until 1946, the first 32 years of his life in Birmingham, Alabama. Understanding this about Birmingham, Alabama, it was considered the capital of the Confederacy, right? It was the place where the Ku Klux Klan had its largest caverns. It was a place that was actually brutal and suppressive to African people and to their culture.
Birmingham.
I like that.
Sun Ra, found a way to find himself in all of that, which is, I think, indicative of the possibilities that we have, right? Because if you can grow up in an environment like that, you can learn how to play piano on your own, learn how to write music on your own, learn how to organize people. You can do all of that, and then and you can find a way to get out of that. Yeah, a way to leave that because you understand that you don't have access to the information in Birmingham that you need to make you Sun Ra. So you move out of Birmingham and you go to Chicago, where you have access to libraries and and books that can turn you on to your history, to make you understand who you are on this planet, in spite of the fact that the mythology of America is that you are a Negro, less than nothing. You find that information. You seek that information out. Because that information is what is the water. It's what allows you to then be a self-determined individual. It's the knowledge that allows you to be a self-determined individual. And with that, once you have the knowledge, there's no stopping you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you for your contribution.
I believe in the gun. Thank you. You take care. You too. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye, man.
Yeah, Reggie, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Mr. Abdullah.
Yes.
I just want to say I appreciate, I used to go to Brooklyn Tech in the 70s, and how I went to the East, and how I went to the East was those posters, the Norman Connors posters, the Carlos Garnett posters, the Doug and Jean Carden with Michael Carvin, and I mean, the posters, I mean, got me there. Vernon, Trevor Gale, we all used to go there like as kids. We probably should have went there more, but I mean, it inspired, it definitely inspired me to be playing now, definitely. So I really appreciate your contributions, all of you, in trying to deal with this problem, because 2020, I still see the same problem. We don't get access to the same economic stuff. I mean, you're forming the East because of the George Wein not giving you access to certain things that we should get access. The same problem reproduces itself. The Black Rock Coalition not getting access, people playing that music and not getting nothing, and them, spitting in our face. And the problem seems to, almost reproduce itself, and it's not us. I mean, it is absolutely not us. As you all are saying, you have musicians dealing with the problem. It's just that we have stuff we're not physically taken away from us, or we're getting blocked from the information because we don't, the grants, certain people get certain grants, and, we didn't even, I didn't even know what the Creative Capital grant was last year, $50,000 freaking grant, and nobody, so any advice just for the new batch of Afro-American musicians dealing with this? Because I'm listening to everything you said, and a lot of all of your things, and it's like filling in the gaps of certain things. But just any advice in dealing with this thing. It's not us at all. I mean, it's absolutely not.
Well, it's the simplest formula that Malcolm gave us, and still works, is each one teach one, right? And the problem is people who not part of that tradition get in a position, say like, I was talking about the publishing, you're a blind reader, but if you don't believe in each one teach one, you're not going to help the next brother or sister who needs that, right? So we have a lot of people in Philly, the older preachers had a lot of economic power in terms of employment in Philly. And when I interviewed the younger ministers in the community who were dealing with unemployed people, they said that the older ministers didn't talk to the younger ministers. So that we actually had to get a grant and have a Sunday forum between the older ministers who had the job contacts and the younger ministers who were dealing with the poor communities, right? Now, in our head, we tend to want to believe that that's going to happen naturally. And I think I talked to Karenga about this too, about the same things happening on the West Coast. It's not happening the way it used to happen. So some of these things we're going to have to do the institution building and make it happen. But you have to bring, so the reason I'm teaching where I teach now is once kids get to college, they're getting wiped out by racist teachers and racist schools, right? So I just figured when I got there, I didn't realize I had Kathleen Cleaver's daughter and Sidney Poitier's daughter, and they were catching hell at them schools. I said, okay, I was just passing through, but I better stay here and cover this base because look at what they did for me when I was young, right? They kind of, so I think we have to kind of have that cosmic belief that if you're covering these brothers and sisters back, that somebody else is doing their job. But sometimes we got to make sure that happens. We have to create those intergenerational things. It is a protracted struggle. We've been doing it. This 1619 can throw you off. We've been fighting this stuff before 1619. You had black people here in 15, right? You had a slave rebellion in South Carolina in 1526. We shouldn't be using our master's chronology. We've been fighting this thing for many centuries, and that's part of taking that back and understanding how we've made it in this country to the extent we have and how we have to, but we've only made it each one teach one, and a lot of these slogans that we were on the board from the East, we made those into principles, 7 principles and things like that. Those are things we have to teach each other very young in age, and that we not only love each other, but we have a responsibility to work together. So people keep saying, Kamoza, you're doing all these things, why are you doing it? The younger people don't understand. I'm just doing what every brother and sister did for my generation. And that's how I learned. The older brothers and sisters who taught me and tutored me the history I teach now, they used to feed me while they were teaching me. They showed me how to wire buildings, to build schools and things like that. And there's a loving process that we have to get back into that. So we do owe each other these things. So, but it is that each one teach one at the most basic level of saying that we have that responsibility. And we have to expect that from people who are not doing their job and kind of put that on them in, a persuasive way. I just put it that way.
Expect
But
and expect.
I think that the reasoning behind each one teach one is that there's an abundance. We take on the scarcity principle very easily. The idea that there's not enough for me, so like crabs in the barrel, we have to fight somebody who gets something that we think that we deserve. But when you really understand this is why music of the spirit, I believe, is an important concept. The spirit is abundant. Yeah, when you deal with an understanding of the omnipotent, all-powerful, omniscient, all-wise, omnipresent, everywhere reality, which is who we are, right? As spiritual beings, that's who we are, right? There is no impossibility that really can come to us that we can't surmount. There's nothing that can happen on the planet that we can't really achieve, right? And I think that that's what we really have to be taught. We have to really be taught, the concept of abundance, right? In dealing with the music of the spirit, in dealing with spirituality, that is there, right? Spirituality is about abundance. It's about the fact that there is no limitation, right? Someone said space is a place. There's no limit to the things that you can do. There's no limit to the things that you can be. Your thought is free and your life is worthwhile. Space is the place. It's all up in there. You know what I'm saying? It's all up in there. And so expansiveness, abundance, right? Think outside of whatever box you think that you're in.
Absolutely, and there was a time where musicians were disseminating their music on their own labels even for a second.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I just came back to that.
This is the latest report.
It didn't stop. In April we went
And
on the
this is,
studio.
what's the story behind your newest creation here?
This is called Diaspora Meets Afro Horn. Now this is the story of this is Diaspora. Sun Ra came to me about 1998 in a dream and told me that Diaspora was an acronym. Now, I've been using the name Diaspora in my bands for many years, and I've been playing the music of the African diaspora with poetry and, and wise sayings and everything. But he said, no. He said, diaspora is an acronym. It means dispersions of the spirit of Ra. And I said, ooh, I didn't think of that. Dispersions of the spirit of Ra. He said, you have to play my music, right? And so I started playing his music in 1998 with my band. Then the last 2 years I met this brother whose name is Francisco Mora Catley, Elizabeth Catley's son.
Yes.
Yeah. And he also was in the Sun Ra band when I was in the Sun Ra band in 1975. you know, somehow got him from Mexico. He told the Mexican diplomats, he said, he can play my music. Not many people in the world can play my music. He's coming with me. They gave him a passport. Somehow walked him out of Mexico. He started playing with somehow. When I was at the Fire Spot in 1975, Francisco was playing drums with the band. You understand what I'm saying? So the last 2 years, Francisco has come to teach my class. He's come in to work as a, you know, to show some of the drummers the percussion elements the Sunrise demonstrated to him. And I played in his band, Afro Horn. And it felt so comfortable because we had the same father, you know, so, you know, it's like, you know, we are brothers without even knowing it. So last year we said we were going to, February 16th, in fact, the music was so great. We were playing at the place called the Zinc Bar. At Sister's Place, we had a great band. We had Reggie Workman, Buster Williams, Jason Moran, and Lenny White. Yeah, we had that at Sister's Place. So, but we were playing at the Zinc Bar. I played the gig at the Zinc Bar, then I went to Sister's Place. And I'm like, this is like unreal. You know, it's like too, you know, it's too unreal. And the people at Sister's Place were saying, y'all gotta record this stuff. And they told me about a studio right on Fulton Street, between Noe Street and Bedford. It's been there for years. His brother has been doing Caribbean music. Brilliant cat, great ears, you know, and so he recorded, so we call it Diaspora Meets Afro Horn, Jazz, the Music of the Spirit, out of Sister's Place, because that's how it came to be. And so this is the first, I've done 10 recordings of my own on my own name, but this is the first one I've done by myself because I haven't done one in, 15 years. So this is the first one I did, and I said, it may be my last one, because I don't know how many more years I got. I'm 72 years old, man. It's hard to get these
2 more years to go, man.
Every time you got a gig, you know what I'm saying?
And you're selling these tonight.
I'm selling them forever.
The Lion's Foreman. It's they had a hand up, I think.
Oh, yeah. Well,
yeah, a lot of pieces, you know, for the past 20 years have been videoing Ras, and so the gap between jazz then and jazz now that nobody understands, right? So now it's a collection of archival material. But I don't want it to be, you know, and working Lois Elaine Griffiths with the New York Poets Cafe. She was a producer from the get-go. And now she's looking for archival of her material, and I have to join, I'm joining her. But my thing is like Amiri Baraka's archives are at Columbia, so you gotta be special to do the research in his archives, right, at Columbia?
I hate that, yeah.
Yeah, right. So that's why I'm saying it's like, okay.
I packed the stuff up before we took it to Columbia, and I should have known. And they held it hostage for a decade. So I couldn't finish another version of his biography for a decade. But yeah, and we should have scanned it on the way. The photographs in Amiri Baraka's archives alone are the story of the Black world. Amiri Baraka has about 500 pictures of him with everybody. It's almost like this was that time, right? And I said, and I didn't have a scanning machine. I think from now on we'll collect this stuff out of people's basements because that's where it is, right?
Yeah.
We need to have a scanning machine because the thing is, at the best case, they put it in storage.
Yeah.
And just sit, and then they tell you, oh, nobody's archiving it, nobody's organizing it, so you can't look at it. The worst case is there's a flood, there's a fire, and it gets messed up. So that's my archives. I had 3,000 pieces. I made a deal through another brother in the Congress Factory people to put it at the Schomburg in the South, which is the Auburn Avenue Research Center. So it's down there, but on the way, I had a dude from Nexus not photocopy, but microfilm every page. Unfortunately, that means he didn't do the music, because I got a lot of albums in there too, but the music's there, right? But they did photograph, and now it's digitalized, and we made sure that it went to the Newark Public Library, because my commitment is the people who made this history, they need to know what their grandparents did. And every black child this is their endowment. When they say you ain't got no endowment, no, you got a big endowment. You just need to be aware of it, right? And claim your endowment and that history that your grandparents and your mother made, that is your endowment, and that's their birthright. And most of black people now, children, don't have their own endowment. They don't even know they have an endowment. And that's part of what we need to teach.
But, I mean, I'm just trying to say, like, with what I have here, I mean, as I said, I don't want it just to be in an archive. I want it to be shown. You know what I mean?
You have to
Shown
make that part of the
simultaneously.
negotiation you're doing when they're collecting it. Yeah, you have to make
What?
that. I made sure that from the very beginning I had control over it and the rights to it.
Well, I mean, the whole point is, it's like Lower East Side. I mean, you know, I've heard more stories of slugs and things that were going on there, which I missed attending for various reasons, because I was an activist in Chinatown, and we were getting, you know, more workers into the Confucius Plaza, Confucius, in the construction business, which was, you know, one group dominated, right? And we were successful in getting about 40 workers, minorities in there.
Do you know that?
And I documented it, and took me 20 years to make a 1-hour film of it.
Well,
So, I
thank you.
mean, you know, that's a history that the Chinese people in Chinatown don't want to talk about. So so because I was with one community arts nonprofit organization that set this thing up, now Chinatown has 50 nonprofit coalition that can't get together to deal with the gentrification in Chinatown.
Yeah.
And there are the cross sections between. In the Congress of African People, we had several Afro-Chinese families. The Loke family. So there's a picture in the New York Times on the front page of a sister in African clothes, and it says, Baraka is building a black nation in Newark. The sister is Afro-Chinese.
Yeah.
Right? So I try to teach that when I teach Asian American students, that our history of oppression and resistance is
Similar. Right.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Let's ask Mingus about that.
Well, you know, this has been, this has been a great discussion, and there's going to be more coming in late March and April and after. And I appreciate everyone's contribution, and thank you for attending. And most certainly thanks to this great panel, Professor Kamosi Woodard, Professor Basir Mchawi, Professor Ahmed Abdullah, and I'd like to, thank you. And so stay tuned to all ongoing series, and I appreciate all the ground that's been covered. Yeah, so and we'll see you next time.
I'm get my CD now.